The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Lincoln Heights Shopping Plaza. Detective Marcus Webb sat in his unmarked sedan, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching the entrance of a jewelry store. He had been tracking a notorious thief named Rachel Martinez for 3 months. She had hit 12 stores across the state, always working alone, always wearing a red jacket and dark sunglasses. Today was supposed to be the day he finally caught her. Marcus checked his phone again. The tip had come in at 6 in the morning from a reliable informant. Rachel would be at this exact location by 9:30. He glanced at his watch. 9:28. His partner, Officer Danny Chen, was positioned at the back exit. They had planned everything perfectly. A woman appeared at the corner of the plaza. Red jacket, dark sunglasses, long brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. That was her. After all these weeks of dead ends and missed opportunities, Rachel Martinez was finally within reach. He radioed Danny to confirm the target was approaching. The woman walked with confidence, her phone pressed to her ear. She seemed to be arguing with someone, her free hand gesturing wildly. Marcus waited until she was closer to the jewelry store entrance. He could not let her get inside. If she managed to grab anything and create a hostage situation, everything would fall apart. He stepped out of his car and moved quickly across the parking lot. The woman was now just feet away from the store entrance. Marcus called out for her to stop, identifying himself as police. The woman turned, confusion spreading across her face. She pulled off her sunglasses, and for a split second Marcus saw her eyes. They were blue. The file said Rachel Martinez had brown eyes, but the red jacket, the hair, the build, everything else matched perfectly. Maybe the file was wrong. Mistakes happened all the time in databases. Marcus could not risk letting her escape. He moved forward, reaching for his handcuffs. The woman stepped back, her phone still in her hand. She asked what was happening, why a police officer was approaching her. Her voice was steady but carried an edge of fear. Marcus told her to put her hands up and turn around. She refused, demanding to know what she had done wrong. In that moment, Marcus made a decision he would regret for the rest of his life. He thought she was reaching for a weapon. The way her hand moved toward her jacket pocket seemed threatening to him. His training kicked in. He lunged forward and threw a punch that connected with the side of her face. The woman fell backward, hitting the concrete hard. Her phone skittered across the pavement. She cried out in pain, her hand going to her face where blood was already starting to flow from a cut above her eyebrow. Marcus moved to restrain her, pulling her arms behind her back despite her protests and screams. Other shoppers started to gather. Someone was recording on their phone. Marcus could hear Danny running up behind him. He snapped the handcuffs on the woman's wrists and hauled her to her feet. She was crying now, asking over and over what she had done, begging him to tell her why this was happening. Marcus pulled out his badge and showed it to the growing crowd, announcing this was official police business and everyone needed to step back. He walked the woman toward his car, reading her rights as they went. She was sobbing, saying there had been a mistake, that her name was Emma, not Rachel. Emma. The name did not register with Marcus at first. He was too focused on securing his suspect and getting her into the vehicle. But as he pushed her head down to guide her into the back seat, she said something that made his blood run cold. She said she was a federal agent. Marcus froze. He looked at Danny, who had gone pale. The woman, Emma, was still crying, but now there was anger in her voice too. She told them to check her jacket pocket, the left one where her credentials were. Marcus reached carefully into the pocket and pulled out a black leather wallet. He flipped it open. FBI Special Agent Emma Rose Mitchell stared back at him from an official identification card. Her badge gleamed in the morning sunlight. Marcus felt like the ground had dropped out from under him. This was not Rachel Martinez. This was a federal agent, and he had just assaulted her in front of dozens of witnesses. Danny started to say something, but Marcus held up his hand. He opened the car door and carefully helped Emma out. He removed the handcuffs, his hands shaking slightly. Emma stood there, blood running down the side of her face, her eye already starting to swell. She did not say anything. She just stared at him with a look that was part fury and part disbelief. Marcus tried to apologize. The words came out jumbled and weak. He explained about the tip, about Rachel Martinez, about how Emma matched the description perfectly. Emma cut him off. She asked if he had bothered to verify the tip. If he had done any surveillance beyond sitting in his car for a few hours. If he had considered that maybe, just maybe, he should have confirmed her identity before attacking her. Marcus had no good answers. He knew he had messed up. Protocol said to verify, to confirm, to be certain before making an arrest, especially one that involved force. But the red jacket, the timing, the location, it had all seemed so right. He had been so sure. Emma pulled out her phone with shaking hands and made a call. Marcus could hear her speaking to someone, explaining the situation. She mentioned Lincoln Heights Plaza, mentioned assault by a local detective, mentioned that she wanted her supervisor on scene immediately. When she hung up, she looked at Marcus with cold eyes. She told him she had been on her way to meet a confidential informant about a completely different case. The red jacket was just a jacket. The sunglasses were because she had a headache. The location was pure coincidence. She had nothing to do with any jewelry store robberies. She was doing her job, just like he was supposed to be doing his. Within 20 minutes, the parking lot was filled with FBI vehicles. Emma's supervisor, a stern woman named Director Patricia Walsh, arrived and immediately took control of the scene. She spoke briefly with Emma, examined her injuries, and then turned her attention to Marcus. Director Walsh asked Marcus to explain himself. He went through the whole story again about Rachel Martinez, about the tip, about how certain he had been. With each word, he could hear how weak his justification sounded. Director Walsh listened without interruption, her face growing harder with each passing moment. When Marcus finished, Director Walsh was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but filled with barely controlled rage. She told Marcus that Emma Mitchell was one of the best agents in the field office. She had been working undercover operations for 3 years. She had put away dangerous criminals and saved lives. And now, because of his reckless actions, Emma was injured and traumatized, and her identity had been compromised in front of dozens of civilians. Marcus felt sick. He had not just made a mistake. He had potentially ruined an agent's career and endangered her life. If word got out about who Emma really was, any criminals she had helped convict might come looking for revenge. The video that shoppers had taken was probably already spreading online. Director Walsh informed Marcus that the FBI would be conducting a full investigation. She would be speaking with his superiors. There would be consequences. Emma had every right to press charges for assault, and Director Walsh would support whatever decision she made. Marcus looked over at Emma, who was being treated by paramedics. She would not meet his eyes. He wanted to apologize again, to somehow make this right. But he knew there was nothing he could say that would fix what he had done. His career, his reputation, everything he had worked for was about to come crashing down. And somewhere out there, Rachel Martinez was still free, probably laughing at how badly this operation had failed. The police station felt different when Marcus walked in that afternoon. Everyone knew what had happened. The video had gone viral within hours. "Cop punches FBI agent," the headline screamed. The footage showed everything, from the moment Marcus approached Emma to the punch that sent her sprawling. It looked even worse on camera than it had felt in the moment. Captain Rodriguez called Marcus into his office before he could even reach his desk. The captain was a fair man, someone Marcus had respected for years, but today his face was set in stone. He closed the door and told Marcus to sit down. The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. Rodriguez finally spoke. He had just gotten off the phone with the FBI director for the entire region. The Bureau was livid. They wanted Marcus suspended immediately pending investigation. They were considering pressing federal charges for assault on a federal officer. And to make matters worse, the mayor's office was already fielding calls from news outlets and civil rights groups. Marcus tried to explain, but Rodriguez held up his hand. He had already read the report. He had seen the video. He understood that Marcus thought he was making a legitimate arrest. But that did not change the fact that Marcus had used excessive force without proper verification. He had violated multiple department policies, and he had created a public relations nightmare that would take months, maybe years, to clean up. The suspension was effective immediately. Marcus had to turn in his badge and gun. Rodriguez told him to go home, not to speak to the media, and to wait for the internal affairs investigation to contact him. As Marcus left the office, he could feel the eyes of every officer in the building on him. Some looked sympathetic, Most just looked away. Marcus drove home in a daze. His wife, Jennifer, was waiting at the door. She had seen the news. She hugged him tight and asked if he was okay. Marcus broke down. He told her everything, how certain he had been, how wrong he had turned out to be. Jennifer listened without judgment, but Marcus could see the worry in her eyes. They had 2 kids in college. They had a mortgage. His job was everything. That evening, Marcus could not eat. He sat in front of the television watching the story unfold on every news channel. Legal experts debated whether he should be criminally charged. Civil rights activists called for his termination. A few law enforcement groups defended him, saying split-second decisions were part of the job, but their support felt hollow. The worst part was seeing Emma's face on the screen. The news had gotten a statement from her through the FBI. She said she was recovering from her injuries and cooperating fully with the investigation. She did not call for Marcus's prosecution, but she did say that law enforcement officers needed to be held accountable for their actions. Her words were measured and professional, which somehow made Marcus feel even worse. 2 days later, Marcus got a call from an internal affairs investigator named Lieutenant Sarah Brooks. She wanted to meet at a coffee shop somewhere neutral. Marcus agreed, desperate for any information about what was going to happen to him. Lieutenant Brooks was younger than Marcus expected, probably in her early 40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She ordered coffee and got straight to business. The investigation was ongoing, but things did not look good for Marcus. The FBI was pushing hard for charges. The department was under pressure from city officials. His best hope was full cooperation and genuine remorse. Marcus asked what Brooks thought would happen. She was honest with him. Best case scenario, he would be fired but avoid criminal charges. Worst case, he would serve time in federal prison. The outcome depended partly on whether Emma decided to press personal charges, and partly on how much political pressure the FBI could bring to bear. Brooks asked Marcus to walk her through everything again, recording the conversation this time. Marcus went through it all, trying to remember every detail. When he got to the moment he threw the punch, Brooks stopped him. She asked why he had not used other methods to restrain Emma. Why not a taser? Why not call for backup? Why go straight to punching a suspect who had not shown any weapon or made any aggressive moves? Marcus admitted he had panicked. He had been so focused on not letting Rachel Martinez escape that he had overreacted. It was not a good answer, and Brooks did not pretend it was. She told him that panic was not an acceptable excuse for an experienced detective. Officers were trained specifically to not panic, to assess situations clearly, to use appropriate levels of force. After the interview, Marcus sat in his car for a long time. He knew Brooks was right. He had failed at the most basic level. He had let his eagerness to close a case override his judgment and training. A good cop would have taken an extra 30 seconds to verify Emma's identity. A good cop would have recognized that she was not acting like a career criminal. A good cop would not have thrown a punch that could end 2 careers. The following week brought more bad news. The FBI released its preliminary findings. Agent Emma Mitchell had suffered a concussion, facial lacerations requiring stitches, and significant psychological trauma. She was on medical leave and would require counseling before returning to duty. Her current undercover operation had been completely compromised, resulting in months of work being wasted and potentially allowing dangerous criminals to escape justice. Marcus read the report and felt physically ill. He had not just hurt Emma. He had damaged an important investigation. People who should have been arrested might now go free because of his mistake. The ripple effects of his actions kept spreading wider and wider. His lawyer, a criminal defense attorney named David Park, called with an update. The district attorney's office was still deciding whether to file charges. Park had been negotiating with both the DA and FBI representatives, trying to find a resolution that would satisfy everyone. But Emma held all the cards. If she wanted Marcus prosecuted, it would probably happen. Park suggested that Marcus write a personal apology to Emma, not a legal document that could be used in court, but a genuine heartfelt letter taking full responsibility. It might not change anything legally, but it could show Emma and the FBI that Marcus understood the gravity of what he had done. Marcus spent 3 days writing the letter. He threw away dozens of drafts. Everything he wrote sounded either too defensive or too pathetic. Finally, Jennifer helped him craft something honest. He apologized for the pain he had caused. He took complete responsibility for his actions. He acknowledged that no explanation could justify what he had done. He said he understood if Emma never forgave him, but he wanted her to know he would carry the weight of this mistake for the rest of his life. He sent the letter through his lawyer, not knowing if Emma would even read it. A week passed with no response. Marcus spent his days at home unable to sleep, barely eating. Jennifer tried to keep things normal for him, but the stress was affecting the whole family. His kids called from college worried about their father. Friends from the department reached out, but Marcus could not bring himself to talk to them. Then on a Tuesday afternoon, Marcus got a call from an unknown number. He almost did not answer, but something made him pick up. The voice on the other end was one he recognized immediately. It was Emma. She said she had received his letter. She appreciated that he had written it, though it did not change what had happened. She told him she had been thinking a lot about that day, about what it meant, about how to move forward. She had decided not to press personal charges against him. The FBI's investigation and the department's internal affairs process would be punishment enough. Marcus could barely speak. He thanked her, his voice cracking. Emma cut him off. She did not want his thanks. She wanted him to understand something important. She said that what he had done was not just a mistake. It was a symptom of larger problems in law enforcement, assumptions based on appearance, acting on incomplete information, using force as a first option instead of a last resort. Emma told Marcus that if he truly wanted to make amends, he needed to become part of the solution. Whether he kept his badge or not, he needed to speak out about what happened and why it was wrong. He needed to help train other officers to not make the same mistakes. He needed to be honest about his failures so others could learn from them. Marcus promised he would. Emma was silent for a moment, then said she hoped he meant it. She hung up without saying goodbye. Marcus sat holding the phone long after the call ended. Emma had given him a gift he did not deserve. But she had also given him a responsibility. If he was going to survive this, if he was going to rebuild any kind of life after this disaster, he had to use it to make things better. He could not just apologize and move on. He had to change. The internal affairs hearing took place 3 weeks after the incident. Marcus walked into the conference room at police headquarters wearing his best suit, his lawyer, David Park, beside him. The panel consisted of 3 senior officers and a civilian oversight representative. They looked at Marcus with expressions that ranged from disappointment to barely concealed contempt. The proceedings lasted 4 hours. They went through every second of that morning at Lincoln Heights Plaza. Video footage was played over and over. Witness statements were read aloud. The panel asked Marcus hundreds of questions, many of them the same ones phrased differently, trying to catch inconsistencies in his story. Marcus answered everything honestly. Yes, he had received a tip about Rachel Martinez. No, he had not verified the tip with multiple sources. Yes, he knew department policy required confirmation before approaching a suspect. No, he had not positively identified Emma before confronting her. Yes, he understood that eye color was a crucial identifying feature he had ignored. The hardest question came from the civilian representative, a retired judge named Margaret Chen. She asked Marcus to explain, in his own words, why he thought it was acceptable to punch a woman who had not threatened him, had not displayed a weapon, and had not attempted to flee. Marcus had no good answer. He said he thought she was reaching for a weapon. Judge Chen asked if he had seen a weapon. Marcus admitted he had not. The judge leaned forward, her voice sharp. She asked if Marcus understood that assuming danger where none existed, especially when dealing with women and minorities, was exactly the kind of policing that communities were protesting against. Marcus said yes, he understood that now. The judge asked if he had understood it before he threw that punch. Marcus was silent. After the hearing, Park told Marcus it could have gone worse. The fact that Emma was not pressing personal charges helped significantly. But the panel still had to recommend some form of discipline. Park thought Marcus would lose his detective rank at minimum, possibly face suspension without pay, maybe even termination. Marcus went home and waited. Jennifer tried to stay positive, but Marcus could see she was preparing for the worst. They had started looking at their finances, figuring out how long they could survive without his income. It was not long. During this time, Marcus started receiving unexpected visitors. The first was Officer Danny Chen, his former partner. Danny sat in Marcus's living room, clearly uncomfortable. He said he felt partially responsible for what had happened. He should have been more vocal about verifying the suspect's identity. He should have questioned Marcus's judgment. Marcus told Danny it was not his fault, but Danny disagreed. Good partners kept each other in check, and Danny felt he had failed to do that. The conversation shifted to what was happening at the station. The department was in turmoil. Officers were taking sides. Some thought Marcus was being made a scapegoat for a genuine mistake. Others thought he deserved everything coming to him. The FBI's presence at the station had been constant, reviewing procedures, questioning officers about the department's culture and training practices. Danny revealed something else. Rachel Martinez had been arrested 2 days after the incident with Emma. She had hit another jewelry store 3 towns over and been caught by state police. The tip Marcus had received had been partially accurate. Rachel had been planning to hit the Lincoln Heights store, but she had changed her plans at the last minute. Marcus's informant had not known about the change. This news hit Marcus hard. He had been right about the threat. Rachel Martinez had been a real danger, but that did not justify what he had done to Emma. Being right about the criminal did not make him right about his methods. It was a bitter pill to swallow. The second visitor was more surprising. FBI Director Patricia Walsh appeared at Marcus's door one evening, alone and unannounced. Jennifer showed her in looking nervous. Director Walsh got straight to the point. She wanted to understand Marcus as a person, not just as the officer who had assaulted her agent. They talked for over an hour. Marcus told Walsh about his career, his 15 years on the force, the cases he had solved, the people he had helped. He talked about why he had become a cop, how his father had been a police officer, how he had grown up believing in justice and service. Walsh listened without comment, her face unreadable. When Marcus finished, Walsh shared some information about Emma. She had joined the FBI 8 years ago after serving in the Army. She had been deployed to Afghanistan, where she had worked in intelligence. She had seen combat, lost friends, and come home determined to continue serving her country. The FBI had been her way of doing that. Walsh explained that Emma had built her career on being undercover. She was good at it because people trusted her, because she did not look threatening, because she could blend in anywhere. What Marcus had done had shattered that ability. Every criminal Emma had ever investigated would now see that video. They would know she was FBI. Her face was everywhere. Her career as an undercover agent was essentially over. Marcus felt tears running down his face. He had not just hurt Emma physically. He had destroyed the work she loved, the identity she had built over years. Walsh handed him a tissue and told him that crying would not fix anything. What mattered now was what Marcus did next. Walsh said the FBI had completed its investigation. They were not recommending federal charges against Marcus. Emma had made it clear she did not want him prosecuted, and the Bureau was respecting her wishes. However, they were recommending significant changes to the local police department's procedures and training. They wanted Marcus to be part of that process. Marcus was confused. Why would the FBI want him involved in anything? Walsh explained that mistakes like his were not isolated incidents. They happened because of systemic failures in training, culture, and accountability. If Marcus was willing to be honest about what he had done wrong and why, he could help train other officers to avoid the same mistakes. His experience, as painful as it was, had value as a teaching tool. Walsh made it clear this was not forgiveness. Marcus would still face consequences from his department. He would still carry the weight of what he had done. But if he was serious about making amends, here was a way to do something productive with his failure. Marcus agreed immediately. Walsh nodded and stood to leave. At the door, she turned back and said that Emma had specifically suggested this arrangement. Despite everything, Emma believed people could learn and change. Walsh said she hoped Emma was right about Marcus. After Walsh left, Marcus sat in silence for a long time. Jennifer came and sat beside him, holding his hand. He told her about the FBI's offer. She asked if he thought he could do it, relive his worst moment over and over to teach others. Marcus said he had to try. It was the only way he could think of to honor Emma's decision not to destroy him completely. The Internal Affairs Panel issued its findings 2 days later. Marcus was stripped of his detective rank and reduced to patrol officer. He was suspended without pay for 6 months. After the suspension, he would be on probation for a year. Any further violations would result in immediate termination. It was harsh, but it was not the end of his career. Marcus's fellow officers had mixed reactions. Some thought he got off too easy. Others thought the punishment was too severe for what they saw as an honest mistake. Marcus tried to ignore both groups. He knew what he had done. He knew what he deserved. The opinions of others did not matter as much as his own conscience. During his suspension, Marcus threw himself into the FBI's training program. He met with psychologists who specialized in use of force decisions. He studied cases similar to his own, learning how other officers had made better choices in similar situations. He practiced de-escalation techniques, learned about unconscious bias, and began to understand how his assumptions about Rachel Martinez had blinded him to the reality of who Emma was. The hardest part was watching the video of himself over and over. Each time he saw himself approach Emma, he spotted new mistakes. His body language had been aggressive. His tone had been commanding rather than questioning. He had given Emma no chance to explain herself. He had decided she was guilty and acted on that decision without verification. It was painful to see, but necessary. Marcus also began attending community meetings where police relations were discussed. He listened to people share stories of being mistreated by officers, of being assumed guilty because of how they looked, of being afraid when they saw police. Their stories reminded him of Emma's face when he had punched her. That same shock, that same betrayal of trust. He started to understand that his mistake was part of a much larger problem. Jennifer supported him through everything. On his worst days when he wanted to quit and just accept that he was beyond redemption, she reminded him of what Emma had said. He had a responsibility to use his failure to make things better. That responsibility was not optional. It was the price of the second chance he had been given. 6 months passed slowly. Marcus spent his suspension working without pay for the FBI's training initiative. He helped develop new protocols for suspect identification and verification. He recorded testimonial videos explaining his mistakes, which would be shown to police recruits across the state. Every time he told his story, he felt the shame anew, but he forced himself to continue. The day Marcus returned to active duty felt surreal. He put on his uniform, now without the detective badge he had earned years ago, and reported for patrol assignment. His new partner was a rookie named Officer Lisa Martinez, fresh out of the academy. She knew who he was. Everyone knew who he was. But she treated him with cautious professionalism. Their first shift together was quiet. Marcus drove while Lisa handled the radio. She asked him questions about procedure and policy, standard rookie behavior. Marcus answered carefully, aware that his judgment had been proven faulty. He second-guessed every decision, worried that his instincts could not be trusted anymore. Around midday, they received a call about a shoplifting in progress at a drugstore. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. This was exactly the kind of situation that had led to disaster before. As they approached the store, he reminded himself of everything he had learned. Verify before acting. Use minimum necessary force. Assume nothing. A store employee met them outside, pointing to a young man in a blue hoodie who was walking quickly away from the building. The employee said the man had stolen cold medicine and pain relievers, probably for making drugs. Marcus felt the familiar urge to chase, to catch, to act, but he stopped himself. He asked Lisa to approach the subject calmly and request identification while he stayed back for safety. Lisa followed his instruction perfectly. She spoke to the young man politely, explaining that there had been a report of shoplifting. The man immediately became cooperative. He explained that he had been planning to pay, but his credit card had been declined. He offered to return the items or pay cash. Marcus verified the man's story with the store. The employee confirmed the man had been at the register when his card failed. There had been a misunderstanding about whether he was leaving to get cash or stealing. The situation was resolved peacefully, with the man paying for his items and no arrest necessary. Back in the car, Lisa commented that it could have gone very differently if they had been more aggressive. Marcus agreed, feeling a small measure of pride that he had handled it correctly. Maybe he could learn to be a good cop again after all. Weeks turned into months. Marcus and Lisa developed a good working relationship. She learned from his experience and he learned from her fresh perspective. They handled domestic disputes, traffic stops, and minor crimes with increasing confidence. Marcus found himself actually enjoying police work again, something he had thought might be impossible. The community response to Marcus's presence was mixed. Some people recognized him from the news and made their disapproval clear. Others appreciated that he was still serving despite his mistakes. Marcus accepted both reactions without complaint. He knew he was lucky to still have a badge at all. One afternoon, Marcus received an unexpected message through the department. Emma Mitchell wanted to meet with him. She was in town for FBI business and had some time available. Marcus's first instinct was to refuse. What could he possibly say to her? But Jennifer convinced him that avoiding Emma would be cowardly. He owed her the courtesy of meeting if she wanted to. They agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town. Marcus arrived early, his hands shaking as he ordered coffee. When Emma walked in, he barely recognized her. She had cut her hair short and wore glasses he did not remember from before. The scar above her eyebrow was still visible, a permanent reminder of his failure. Emma sat down across from him, her expression neutral. She thanked him for coming. Marcus started to apologize, but Emma held up her hand. She said she had heard his apologies already. She had watched some of the training videos he made for the FBI. She had read reports about his work during the suspension. She had not come here for more apologies. She wanted to know if he had actually changed or if he was just going through the motions to save his career. Marcus thought about the question carefully. He told her that he could not be sure. He believed he had changed. He looked at situations differently now. He questioned his assumptions. He understood how much damage quick judgments could cause. But he also knew that believing you had changed and actually being different were not the same thing. Emma nodded. She said his honesty was encouraging. She told Marcus that she had struggled a lot after the incident. The physical injuries healed quickly, but the psychological impact lasted much longer. She had nightmares about being attacked. She flinched when people approached her too quickly. She had lost confidence in her ability to read situations, which was essential for undercover work. The FBI had offered her a different position, one that did not require going undercover. She had accepted, partly because her face was too well known now, and partly because she needed a break from that kind of stress. In a strange way, Marcus had forced a career change that she might have needed anyway. She had been burning out from years of undercover work. Now she worked in training and strategy, helping other agents prepare for dangerous situations. Marcus did not know what to say. Emma continued. She explained that she had thought a lot about whether to press charges against him. Part of her had wanted to. She had been angry, betrayed, hurt, but she had also recognized something in his face that day. Genuine remorse. Not just fear of consequences, but real understanding that he had done something terrible. She told Marcus that the criminal justice system was not set up to produce real change in people. Prison time would not have made him a better officer or a better person. It would have just punished him and moved on. She had decided she wanted something different. She wanted Marcus to use what happened as a catalyst for actual growth and reform. That was why she had suggested he work with the FBI on training. Emma asked if Marcus knew why she wore the red jacket that day. He admitted he did not. She explained that an informant she was meeting had specified she should wear red so he could identify her in a crowd. It was a simple safety measure that had backfired spectacularly. Marcus felt the weight of that irony. If he had just asked her why she was there, if he had taken 1 minute to verify, everything would have been different. They talked for over an hour. Emma asked about Marcus's family, his work, his hopes for the future. Marcus asked about Emma's recovery, her new role at the FBI, whether she had found peace with what happened. She said peace was probably too strong a word. Acceptance was more accurate. She had accepted that bad things could happen to good people trying to do their jobs. She had accepted that the system was flawed. She had accepted that change came slowly and often through painful experiences. Before they parted, Emma said something that stayed with Marcus forever. She told him that she did not forgive him because she thought he deserved forgiveness. She forgave him because carrying that anger around was poisoning her. Forgiveness was for her benefit, not his. But she also said that if he truly wanted to honor that forgiveness, he needed to keep working on himself and the system for the rest of his career. 1 good year was not enough. This had to be a lifetime commitment. Marcus promised it would be. Emma stood to leave, then paused. She said that Director Walsh had been right to give him a chance. People could change, even people who made terrible mistakes. But change required constant effort and vigilance. The moment Marcus thought he had changed enough, that would be the moment he would stop growing. After Emma left, Marcus sat alone for a while. He thought about how much his life had changed in less than a year. He had lost his rank, his reputation, and nearly his career. But he had gained something too. A deeper understanding of what it meant to serve and protect. A recognition of his own biases and weaknesses. A responsibility to do better and help others do better. He texted Jennifer that the meeting had gone well. She responded with a heart emoji and said she was proud of him. Marcus smiled for the first time in what felt like months. He was not the same man who had thrown that punch in the parking lot. That man had been certain and careless. This man was uncertain and careful. That might not sound like improvement, but Marcus knew it was. On his way back to the station, Marcus stopped at the Lincoln Heights Plaza. He stood in the parking lot where everything had happened. The spot where Emma had fallen was just pavement, no different from any other section. But Marcus could see it clearly in his mind. He could see her blood on the concrete, hear her cries, feel the handcuffs clicking shut on her wrists. He made a silent promise to her and to himself. Every time he put on his uniform, he would remember this place. He would remember how quickly good intentions could lead to terrible actions. He would remember that the badge was not permission to stop thinking or permission to assume. It was a responsibility to serve everyone with dignity and respect, even when it was difficult, even when it was uncertain. Marcus got back in his car and drove to the station. Lisa was waiting for him with their assignment sheet. Another shift, another chance to get it right. That was all he could ask for. 2 years after the incident at Lincoln Heights Plaza, Marcus stood in front of a room full of police recruits. The training facility was modern and bright, filled with eager young faces who still believed they could make a difference. Marcus remembered being that young once, that confident. He wondered how many of them would face a moment like his, a split second where everything could go terribly wrong. The instructor introduced Marcus as a special guest speaker, someone who had learned difficult lessons about proper police procedure. Marcus stepped forward, pulled up the now infamous video on the screen behind him, and pressed play. The recruits watched in uncomfortable silence as Marcus approached Emma, as he threw the punch as she fell. Some of them shifted in their seats. A few looked away. When the video ended, Marcus did not make excuses. He walked them through every mistake he had made, every protocol he had violated, every assumption that had led him astray. He explained about unconscious bias, about the pressure to close cases, about the danger of being too certain. He told them about Emma's injuries, her destroyed career as an undercover agent, the months of recovery she had needed. Then he told them the most important part. He explained that being a good cop was not about being fearless or aggressive. It was about being thoughtful and restrained. The bravest thing an officer could do was slow down in a tense situation, verify information, and choose not to use force when it was not absolutely necessary. That took more courage than any amount of physical aggression. The recruits asked questions. One young woman wanted to know how Marcus lived with what he had done. He told her honestly that some days were harder than others. He carried guilt with him constantly, but he had learned to channel that guilt into positive action. Every good decision he made now, every situation he handled correctly, was his way of balancing the scales, even though he knew they would never truly balance. A young man asked if Marcus thought he should have been fired. Marcus paused. He said that many people believed he should have been, and they had valid reasons for thinking so. He had kept his job partly through luck, partly through Emma's generosity, and partly through his commitment to change. Whether that was fair or not was for others to judge. What mattered was that he never took the second chance for granted. After the presentation, several recruits came up to thank Marcus for his honesty. One young officer named James said that Marcus's story had changed how he thought about policing. He had joined the academy thinking being tough was the most important quality for a cop. Now he understood that being careful and empathetic mattered more. Marcus had given dozens of these presentations over the past 2 years, at police academies, community forums, and law enforcement conferences. Each time he hoped that at least one person in the audience would learn from his mistakes. If his failure could prevent even one similar incident, maybe some good could come from it. His work with the FBI's training program had evolved. He now helped design entire curricula around use of force decision-making and unconscious bias. Director Walsh had become something of a mentor, pushing Marcus to think deeper about systemic issues in policing. She did not let him focus only on his individual mistake. She made him understand how department culture, training shortfalls, and lack of accountability all contributed to incidents like his. Marcus's personal life had stabilized too. Jennifer had stood by him through everything, though the stress had tested their marriage. They had gone to counseling together, working through the trauma of those terrible months. His kids had struggled with having a father who was infamous, but they had eventually come to respect his efforts to make amends. His daughter had even written a college essay about him, about learning that people could grow from their failures. Officer Lisa Martinez had been promoted to detective, something that filled Marcus with pride. She had learned from him but had not repeated his mistakes. She was patient, thorough, and fair. Everything a detective should be. They still worked together sometimes, and Lisa often said that Marcus had taught her more about what not to do than what to do. It was meant as a joke, but it stung with truth. The department itself had changed significantly. New protocols required verification of suspect identity through multiple sources before any approach. Body cameras were now mandatory for all officers, with strict penalties for turning them off. De-escalation training had been expanded from a single day to a full week. Community oversight of police actions had been strengthened. Not everyone was happy with the changes. Some officers felt they were being second-guessed constantly, that their hands were tied by excessive regulation. They blamed Marcus for making their jobs harder. He accepted that blame. If the job was harder now, maybe that was how it should be. Easy mistakes led to devastating consequences. Marcus had crossed paths with Emma several times since their coffee shop meeting. They were not friends, but they had developed a professional relationship based on mutual respect. Emma had thrived in her new role at the FBI. She had created training programs that were being adopted nationwide. In a strange way, they had both found new purposes because of that terrible day. At one conference where they both presented, Emma spoke about victimization and recovery. She talked openly about being assaulted by Marcus, using clinical terms that made the incident feel both more real and more distant. When Marcus gave his presentation afterward, he could see Emma in the audience, her face thoughtful and attentive. After they finished, she approached him. Emma told him she had been watching his work for the past 2 years. She said she was satisfied that he had kept his promise to her. He had used his failure as a teaching tool. He had been honest about his mistakes. He had worked to change not just himself but the system that enabled his actions. She said she was glad she had given him that chance. Marcus thanked her, his voice thick with emotion. Emma shook her head. She said thanks were not necessary. They both had jobs to do. His job was to continue this work for the rest of his career. Her job was to make sure people like her never got hurt by officers like him again. They were working toward the same goal from different angles. Before she left, Emma mentioned something else. The scar above her eyebrow had faded but was still visible. She had considered getting plastic surgery to remove it. Instead, she had decided to keep it. When people asked about it, she told them the truth. It was a reminder that even people who were supposed to protect you could hurt you, and it was also a reminder that people could change if they were willing to do the hard work. Marcus understood. He carried invisible scars from that day too. Scars of shame and regret that would never fully heal. But like Emma, he had chosen not to hide them. They were part of who he was now. A better person than he had been, though still flawed and still learning. On the 3rd anniversary of the incident, Marcus returned to Lincoln Heights Plaza. It had become a yearly ritual for him. He stood in the parking lot where Emma had fallen and spent a few minutes in reflection. He thought about the man he had been that morning, so certain he was doing the right thing. He thought about the man he was now, constantly questioning himself but trying to do better. Jennifer joined him this year, holding his hand as they stood in silence. She asked if he would ever forgive himself. Marcus said he did not think complete self-forgiveness was possible or even desirable. Some mistakes should hurt forever, but he had learned to live with the guilt, to use it as motivation rather than letting it destroy him. They walked back to their car, passing shoppers who had no idea of the history beneath their feet. Life went on. People made mistakes. Some learned from them. Some did not. Marcus had committed himself to being someone who learned, who grew, who used failure as a foundation for something better. At the station, a new class of recruits was graduating. Captain Rodriguez had asked Marcus to give a speech at the ceremony. It was a sign of how far he had come that the department now trusted him to address new officers. He had prepared remarks about service, integrity, and the weight of the badge, but as he stood at the podium looking at all those young faces, Marcus set aside his prepared speech. Instead, he told them about a morning 3 years ago, when he had been absolutely certain he was right. He told them how that certainty had destroyed 2 careers and harmed an innocent person. He told them that the most dangerous thing an officer could be was too confident. He urged them to embrace uncertainty, to verify before acting, to choose restraint over aggression, to remember that every person they encountered was someone's daughter or son, someone's friend or spouse. To understand that the badge gave them power but also gave them responsibility to use that power wisely and sparingly. He finished by saying that none of them would have perfect careers. They would all make mistakes. What mattered was what they did after those mistakes. Did they learn and grow? Did they take responsibility? Did they work to ensure others did not repeat their errors? That was what separated good cops from bad ones. The applause was polite but thoughtful. These young officers had been moved by his words. Marcus could see it in their faces. Maybe some of them would remember his story when they faced their own difficult moments. Maybe his failure would prevent theirs. As Marcus left the ceremony, he checked his phone. There was a message from Emma. It was simple and to the point. She had watched a video of his speech online. She said it was good work and to keep it up. 3 words that meant more to Marcus than any award or commendation. Good work. Keep going. Marcus smiled and put his phone away. He had spent 3 years trying to earn redemption for 30 seconds of terrible judgment. He would probably spend the rest of his life continuing that effort. But Emma's brief message told him he was on the right path. Not forgiven, perhaps never fully forgiven, but moving forward, learning, growing, helping others avoid his mistakes. That evening, Marcus sat with Jennifer on their back porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She asked what he was thinking about. He said he was thinking about second chances, about how rare and precious they were. He had been given one he did not deserve. Now his job was to make that second chance count for something. Jennifer squeezed his hand. She reminded him that he had already made it count. The training programs he helped create, the officers he had taught, the protocols that had been changed, all of that was his legacy now alongside his mistake. He would always be the cop who punched an FBI agent, but he would also be the cop who used that failure to make policing better. Marcus thought about that as darkness fell. Maybe that was the best he could hope for, to be remembered for both his worst moment and his response to it, to be a cautionary tale and an example of growth, to be proof that people could change, even after they had done something unforgivable. The badge sat on the table beside him, gleaming in the porch light. Tomorrow he would put it on again and return to work. Another day of serving and protecting. Another chance to get it right. Another opportunity to honor the second chance that Emma had given him. He would keep working, keep learning, keep trying to be worthy of the trust that had been placed in him. That was all he could do. And finally, 3 years later, it felt like enough.